Hello, my name is Bonola and I create content on psychology, spirituality and everything in between. The focus of today's video is I look at how indigenous practices after the death of a loved one facilitated the healing process, the grief process of the individual and the community. So if you're interested, stick around. So we start with South African history because everything happens in context. South African history, the apartheid government had laws and policies that forced people into certain areas. This was under the Group Areas Act and the Native Resettlement Act, and what happened is people were then moved into townships and homelands, thereby creating new communities and almost entirely new families, where some families lost the heads of the household and kids were being raised by neighbors. And you find that within the current township structure, there are about 4 generations that know the township as home and not having other homelands to go home to. So some of these indigenous practices were passed down through families, that were passed down through communities that did survive. And over the years, they are continuing to change. But what I want to look at is how they played a significant role in aiding mental health during a difficult time, such as a death of a loved one. So African spirituality is the spirituality we're going to be focused on within this video. And according to African spirituality, the world exists in 2 parts. The physical, where the body lives. This is where we perceive, this is the tangible. And the spirit world, the world where the living can visit through dreams and trances. But also within this world exists the things that we cannot see or touch, being the ancestors, being angels, being guides. Okay, with African spirituality, there is a level of continuity that exists between our worlds, almost a thin veil where the two meet, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through trances, dance, music. The two can always meet, and death was not the end. Instead, death was just a continuation of a different world to ours. And if I could make it an example, is looking at the process between a fetus from its mother's womb moving into the world. Similar to death, it wasn't the end but a continuation, and it helped in attachment. It helped in healing those grief wounds, that instead of viewing the person as having passed and ceasing to exist completely, you had now gained a great ancestor, versus it just being final. So when we now look at some of the practices, we start with when the moment of death, when the person passes away. The spirit is treated with so much love and compassion, such as that of an infant or a newborn, where the moment the person is declared as dead or deceased, the elders start to talk to the spirit. So although in that moment the body and the spirit have separated, the spirit is believed to still be present. And their families, the elders of the families, would then speak to the spirit, letting it know that this is what has happened and this is what is coming. And you see that throughout the process, the spirit is treated with respect and care and compassion, as if to say, we can only imagine the state that you are in, considering that the separation of the body and the spirit is such a traumatic process, and you are then treated with that love and compassion to guide you through as you grow where you are, or in that next world. So after this has happened, this happens through, one, the elders speak, but also the elders normally use a certain branch to help the spirit attach to, and it's called ihlahla lomhlankosi. There's an English name for it. I'll get it for you. But yes, so that is used to continually communicate with the deceased and to help the spirit attached and move it around. So moving it from the place where the person had passed to the morgue, from the morgue to the family home, from the family home to the gravesite. I want to give a breakdown without giving too much detail, because that's just going to become confusing. But I also want to give enough detail so that you see how these indigenous practices fostered or had a psychological impact on the community and people. So the first one is that continuity, that when the person passes, it doesn't just stop there. The spirit is seen to still be there, and at every part of the process the spirit is informed as to what is happening and what must be then done. So if the person passed away in a car accident, the family would gather at the scene of the accident with a ihlahla lomhlankosi branch to help it attach and speak to the spirit, to let it know what has happened and what is coming next. For example, letting it know that it just passed away in a car accident and its body has been moved to the morgue to be placed in the fridge while they make the funeral arrangements. A lot of the time, some families follow the body to the morgue, make sure that it's placed and the body is left with the spirit while the family goes home to make the funeral arrangements. The moment it is said that a person has passed, things are done within the home to make sure that we start to prepare to accept people. The first thing that is done is ashes rubbed on the windows, and this is a signifier letting the community know that a death has occurred. And this also lets the community know that anybody who walks through the gates must come correct, you know, come dressed respectfully, cover your head when you're a female, and cover your shoulders as a male. The dress sense is always modest, and this ties into shared values within the community, that we show respect to our deceased, we show respect to our elders, and when such things happen, people are called to come correct. So during this time, the family prepares a particular room in the home where an elder chooses who is going to sit in mourning for the person that has passed. A lot of the time it's the mother, if the person still has a mother, but it then changes depending on who is available to stand in for that person. These people will sit in the room with a lit candle, and the significance of a lit candle is that the spirit of the person is at home, that has been brought home, needs to not sit in the dark, because during those first few days when nothing is happening, the person is in limbo. It's almost like the first days of being born. You're normally put on your mother's skin so that you stay close to a familiar place, you know. So a similar process to this one, where their world is still remains lit. This candle will stay on until the person has been buried. The family then, or the people who've been chosen to sit in mourning, then sit on the mattress, and people start coming in from the community. There is no invite. And during the week where the funeral arrangements are being done, people come in to pay their respects. this part for me looks like debriefing, because the family, as everyone comes in, the family has to tell the story over and over in order to let people know what has happened. And as much as this may be triggering and very emotional, what then happens is that they are given comfort. And for every time they tell the story, the person who's sitting on the other end listening also provides comfort. And it's comfort through song, it's comfort through gifts, but it's that thing of sharing your pain. So it almost seeing that everybody who comes in gets a little, and while you tell the story over and over, you are debriefing, you are slowly but surely coming to terms that it happened, because you keep telling it to someone, and that someone acknowledges it and acknowledges your pain through it. And that looks like a mini therapy session to me. And then we go on to the part where during this process, another thing that happens is the elder will also choose people who are going to go and wash the deceased, give them their final bath. And this could be triggering, so heads up. So these people that have been chosen will go down, or even volunteered will go down. There's the main person that that leads the bathing, but everyone else is there as a support system. With every difficult part of this process, nobody is ever required or is ever left to do it on their own. Whether it's the males that go out to source the animal, or it's the people that go and give the final bath, nobody ever walks alone. And it's for support purposes, but it's also to say there is always someone to catch you should you feel not strong enough to see it through. Should you feel emotional in that moment, there's also a support system that is there with you. Then from those different families, some families slaughter a cow, especially when it was a head of the household, but this was almost one to let the ancestors know what has happened and to welcome you into their realm. And also this will then serve to feed the community after the funeral. The day before the funeral, the body is brought back home, and sometimes the family goes and fetches the body from the morgue so that they speak to it to let it know where he's going and what is being done. And that the day before, the family gets to view the body, they get to say their final goodbyes. It's almost like in that moment you are anchored again into, so here is this person that we are saying is gone. It's that visual cue of, okay, I see them there. And a lot of people describe the person as looking peaceful in open caskets, but when it's not an open casket, it's just one of those that the casket is in the home. And during this time, there's also ways of behaving, ways of speaking that are expected from people during this time, where you don't raise your voice, you don't shout. If conflicts do arise, they are encouraged to take the easy way out and not, this is not what we're doing here. So it was almost that there's a certain standard of behavior that is expected throughout the ceremony. When the person is now, the day of the funeral, the community gathers around the casket, and the casket is put in the yard, and there's a tent. Depending on the person's belief system, a lot of the time there'll be a priest to head the ceremony. But this particular ceremony was so touching because it's almost like a memorial service, a ceremony to say this person really existed, to say this is the person that I lost. This is the life I lived with this person. So it wasn't just the family members, but anyone who was close to the deceased got to stand up and give their account of this person and the life that they lived. And for the family, it's almost seeing that this loss that you're feeling was not just yours. You're not just imagining it. It's not just happening in your head. And I think there's such a big significance in that you're not alone in the pain you're feeling. And also you get to know different versions of the person you've lost outside of your own. You get to see them outside of being a mom and outside of being an aunt, outside of being a child. You get to see them as a friend, as a colleague, as a partner. You see them as other things outside of what you thought. And I think there's a level of catharsis in it. Sad, triggering, but there's that sense that even in those moments of weakness and sadness, you're not alone in it. There was always someone to carry you. These ceremonies are largely led by song, especially favorite songs of the person that has passed. You know, those are whether played or sang, but it's led with that song. And in all these areas, I see anchors, little moments that tie your memories and emotions to one spot. When you go into moving to the graveyard, the spirit is also then carried using lehlahla, letting it know that we are now taking you to your final resting place, and the hearse leads the way while the family and the community go and bury the person. At the gravesite, there are proceedings. Different families do it differently. Some families even put a blanket over the casket to say that we are leaving you here, don't get cold, here's a blanket. It's the compassion and love doesn't stop. The attachment is not just severed. If anything, it's strengthened in the fact that in the next form that you're taking up, you will be a good ancestor or an angel. So then there's another part of the process where now the casket has been lowered and the family is able to take a handful of dirt and put it into the grave. And that I have noted throughout different religions and different countries, in that it signified another anchor moment where you are now leaving this person here. As you pour the dirt over them, it's almost that moment you're gonna come back to when the stages of grief start to hit and denial comes, and it's that moment you are able to say, but it happened. I saw that. It doesn't make the stages of grief any less difficult. It doesn't take away from them, but it almost offers a tie to hold you down, to say, this was the discomfort and the pain I felt. This was the loss I felt in the moment. And the whole time during this process, whether it's for the males or the females, you have different ways of coping, where the males are together in their mourning. They are also together in now starting. Oh, I had to BRB there for a second. But yes, they were together in carrying this load of the passing, but also as they start to fill the grave, it's not filled by just the family members. It's led by the family members, and the person will fill and fill and fill until they're tired. And the next person will take over, and it will be a whole team effort in filling the hole. Mind you, these holes are dug by excavators, but they are completely filled by family, friends in the community. And this is normally a very emotional process for the person who are doing the fillings, which are the men in the families and the community, or the people who are observing, being I want to say the woman, because it's very the gender roles are very clear with this particular one, but it's a very emotional process, and how one chooses to express, whether it's through tears or just doing the physical work. It's your time. It's your time to cry and grieve and scream and do what you need to do in order to acknowledge the feeling in that moment, with no judgment, but just support. From there, the spirit is then informed that it is being left behind, and this would be where its body rests for the rest of time, and that, you know, most families leave prayers, leave wishes, and we go back home. Some families take the spirit back home, which is a different ceremony altogether, and it's taking it back home so that it officially joins the ancestors, where the body returns to dust and the body and the spirit then ascends to its next life. These processes, even when you go home after the funeral, there's always a catered lunch or breakfast. People are fed, the community stays around, people help clean, dishes are washed, and throughout that process you see that the pain and the grief is not only dealt with by the individual, but the community is always there to provide that support. And the small indigenous practices that are involved in from the point of the person passing away right until the moments that are to come, like the 10-day ceremony or the cleansing ceremonies, you then start to realize that those are meant to not only validate the experience, helps the person acknowledge what has happened, but by the time you get to the cleansing or the 10-day mark, you've had more than 3 occasions where the family and the community come together and you talk about the person that has passed, and you share memories and you share teachings, and it's almost like that continuation, that just because the body now does not exist or the body is now in the ground, it does not mean that this person is gone. There is that continuation, that this is what they lived in this particular world. This is what they left us with. And that is so significant in starting the healing process, because it didn't just end. It doesn't make it any better that you've lost someone significant. And if you understand the grief process, it's never linear, it's never you just accepting. But the grief process is one where one moment you've accepted and the other you're right back to not believing and picking up the phone and trying to call the person and remembering that they have passed on. You know, where you go back and you say, oh, but God, this is what I would give to have this person back. And then you go right back down to the sadness and the depression of just understanding that you'll never get to see, touch, or feel this person in the same manner again. Even the anger And it's never just a linear process, but these different processes that happen help you tie yourself to something when these emotions do come. That when the emotion passes, there's that reframe that this was not the end, it was just a continuation. Where the anger comes, you tie into something greater than yourself, and this continues. So after the passing of the person, the main family members will grieve, and in their grieving process, they dress a certain way, they have certain rules and regulations that they abide by for the grief process, grief period. And this could be anywhere between 3 months and a year. And after that time, another ceremony is done to cleanse now the spirit, ensuring that the person doesn't attach themselves to people, but you cleanse the spirit of the hardship it's been through over that time, or over the grief period. So another thing that stands out for me within this process is recognizing the values and principles that communities follow. So it was not just about the individual, it was the belief system that held us together as a community, that understanding of respect, the understanding of love and compassion, the understanding that we come together when something so great happens. We all band together, come together to support each other through the pain. Over the years, some of the customs have been lost. So like the window one, the ash, that one, I don't see it done as often. And there are certain things that are now being added to get into with the times, where the family is very far from the site itself. And this could also be a space thing, where there's not much empty spaces at the graveyards for the families to be close. But you also feel, I get a sense that in losing some of these indigenous practices, in losing some of the practices that we followed within the grief, we may lose what it was intended to do, what it was intended to signify. That now when people go to funerals, it becomes more about your dressed outfit more than it is about the respects, paying your respects and supporting the family, where only the grave is now filled mechanically or filled by hired people. And it almost saying you lose some of that. If you think of it from a physical action point of view, how much tension you are able to release, and the conversations you're having as you feel the whole for your brother, you feel your whole for your niece, your nephew, because they have now entered and have started to become part of your ancestors. And it's small things like that, that as much as progress will happen, change will happen, change has been happening, I think this particular process has also seen its fair share of change because of what the world is like. Maybe some of these practices were worth keeping because of their significance, that with African spirituality and these indigenous practices allowed you not to be alone. And they are not without their flaws. So family quarrels will always be there, complications will always be there, but some of these values and principles almost put boundaries around things like that there are not going to be any quarrels about money during this time, and any quarrels will be resolved thereafter, that the family will be given time to mourn. And during this time, they don't necessarily socialize, and people don't necessarily just come and visit them all willy-nilly. There are certain regulations that actually protect, that draw a nice neat boundary around the person to allow them to actually now mourn, because 3 months down the line after a person passes, that's where it really hits the permanence of the current situation. And having those boundaries helped families heal, or help families connect in other ways. And during this time, this is where I would believe that individual counseling would then do the person good, because they've gone through the initial part with support, but the rest of the road they may need to still travel it on their own before then reconnecting with the family. So as always, I do put free resources at the end. I think I put it in the description box with the last video, but even with this one, I'll put in the description box. These are free resources you can reach out to, whether it is for grief, or you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling suicidal, any kind of help and assistance. Some of these may help to just reach out and just talk to someone should you feel the need to. I hope you found this video informative, and bye for now.